Aw, tell me that's not cool. You tell me that's not cool. That's right, you're not gonna tell me it's not cool, because then you'd be wrong. Hello, you dirty potters. How are you today? Today we're going to take that next step in our ongoing carving series. Now, for those of you who haven't been keeping up with the channel, I've already shown you guys how to make stuff like this, and I've also shown you guys how to make stuff like this. These two are very easy carving patterns that you can both achieve by using the simple trim tool that comes inside of your beginner package. I made sure to use this tool specifically so that you don't have to buy any extra equipment, anything like that. You can basically just start off with using the trim tool that already comes in your beginner package. I didn't want to start off episode 1, 2, and 3 with a bunch of stuff like you gotta go buy this, and you gotta go buy this, and you gotta go buy this. I just wanted to show you guys how to use this to its maximum potential. I heavily suggest, if you haven't seen the videos that I've made on how to make these two very easy patterns to make, you go watch them right now. I will link them down below for you, because you kind of need to do at least this one to continue this series. In today's carving episode, I'm going to teach you guys about sgraffito. You've probably seen sgraffito somewhere online or somewhere in your ceramic art career, and it's extremely easy to do, but you kind of need a base understanding of what carving is first, and sgraffito can kind of be whittled down into carving through a surface to make either a positive or a negative image. Technically speaking, sgraffito dates back all the way to Renaissance Italians when they started using it on a lot of their buildings. And sgraffito does sound super fancy. It sounds like something that you'll never be able to accomplish on the art world. But sgraffito technically means just to scratch or to scratch through. That's really all it is. The majority of the time that you're going to see in your ceramic art classes is in stuff like this that the Grecians made. This is also technically sgraffito, and you can probably see a pattern as they took a base form, they put either one or two colors over it. While this one's Italian and this one is technically Grecian, you can probably start to see that they basically got a base form, put a dark color over it, and put either a darker or a lighter cover over it and just kind of scratch through it, which is fair because sgraffito technically means to scratch or to scratch through. And technically speaking, because I've already taught you guys how to do a carved surface, all we really need to do is make a darkened surface over our lighter surface so we can scratch through it. But, you know, man, I wish I had something, I wish I had an editor that would, put something right here for me so that I could, put it on my pottery to make a darkened surface so I could scratch through to the... Thank you, editor, who is probably just me. This is underglaze, and underglaze comes in a bunch of different forms. It goes anywhere all the way from cone 04 to cone 6, depending on which type you buy, and you can very easily coat a high majority of your greenware in this black underglaze to, well, at a later time, make sure that it stays under your glaze. That's why it's called underglaze. Potter tip. Always make sure you read the back of the bottles of your underglaze if you are planning to do the sgraffito technique. While sgraffito is super easy if you know basic carving techniques in the first place, do not make the mistake that I have totally made before of going to the store and just buying any underglaze off the shelf. I heavily suggest that you read the directions on the back of the bottle so it tells you what cone your underglaze will go to. Many times have I put 04 underglaze on something that's clearly going up to cone 6 after it's already gone through the bisque or greenware bisquing process, and that messed up my stuff. Make sure you read the directions because there's underglaze that you can put on bisque and there's underglaze that you can put on greenware, and there's a bunch of different types of underglazes, but make sure you get the right one. This specific underglaze, by the way, goes all the way up to cone 6 from cone 04. So I can put it on my bisqueware, I can put it on my greenware, I can put it on most of my ware except for stuff that's already fired because that would technically be overglazed, but we're not there yet, calm down. I can pretty much put it on anything that's not already fully fired and glazed because that would be considered an overglaze. I want to put this stuff underneath my glass-like layer of real glaze because it's an underglaze. Do you get the name? It goes underglaze, oh my god! Let's start off by putting a little layer of underglaze right here just to test it out. Once you've put on at least 2 to 3 coats of your underglaze and it's dried a little bit, you can very easily just take your trim tool and do what I showed you in the last video. You're pretty much going to do this, you're just going to do it through the black underglaze. Go ahead and take that beginner's trim tool and just start carving away down the body, just a little bit right through the black underglaze. You do still want to clean up those lines a little bit. The only issue is this time you don't want to put as much pressure as last time. So last time I was like, go ahead and scrub them all off. This time, just very, very gently do it. If you do this too hard, you'll end up scrubbing a lot of the underglaze off, especially if it's not all the way dry, and you don't really want that. So just make sure you're really exact with your tiny sponge. That's not too bad. That's gonna look really cool to me. I don't do this too often, but I know for sure if I put a glaze over this, I'm gonna get the effect as if I put it over a darker clay body, a lighter clay body, and now I'm also gonna get the effect of that texture all over my cup. Usually, I do this over the entire mug, much like this, which I've totally already painted. I didn't want you to watch me do it. Haven't you seen a cooking show before? You know I have prepared stuff. You don't have to stop right here and just do part of the cup. You can very easily do the entire cup. I just showed you this little bit as an example, but this kind of looks incomplete. My favorite thing to do is do it on the entire piece, like this. You see, now it looks a little bit more complete, now that it's the same texture all the way around. Every now and then while you're painting your underglaze, you're gonna get it on a couple of spots that you might not want it on. This handle has a little bit extra and I really don't need it there. This isn't too bad because you can very easily just take your sponge and rub it right off with a little bit of water. Most people choose to put a clear gloss glaze over stuff like this, but if you do have a glaze much like pink or something lighter that will really have that texture fall into itself, then you can very easily put something like that on it. But try to avoid, don't put black on here, clearly, it's gonna make the entire thing black. Try to put glazes on something like this that are two-dimensional, maybe even leave it as raw work, but try not to put stuff on here that's just like one solid color because you pretty much just did a bunch of carving for nothing at that point. Last thing I want to show you is while this is really nice, the contrast in between white porcelain clay and black underglaze and a sgraffito technique, you can very easily do this with other colors. This is a white porcelain clay body, this is black underglaze, and this, my friends, is blue glaze. Underglaze doesn't really have that many glass-like materials in it, much like regular glaze at Cone 5-6 does. And because of that, you can kind of layer it as much as you want without it really going anywhere. So on top of this black underglaze, I can very easily put a blue, wait for this to dry, and carve underneath that. I can even put another layer on this afterwards, but I'm not going to because I'm lazy and this video is getting too long, and some of you have the attention span of a fly. You can pretty much layer as much underglaze you want onto each other and it doesn't run that bad. Unless you put literally the entire bottle of this on it and then it might have an issue. But as of now I can probably put 2 or 3 more layers of color on this and it'll probably be fine. And you can carve right through this as well as if you were doing it on the first layer. Aw, tell me that's not cool. You tell me that's not cool. That's right, you're not gonna tell me it's not cool, because then you'd be wrong. Keep in mind, you don't have to use this singular tool like I've been showing you the entire time. This is just one pattern out of all the patterns that I've been teaching you with this carving series over the past couple of weeks. You can very easily get your own trim tool if you have some diamond cutting edge tools, if you have any other type of trim tool, anything like that, you can very easily trim through the same way and do sgraffito in that manner. Tip. While you're brushing on your glaze onto your green or bisqueware, there's a high probability that you're going to get it on spaces that you don't want it to be on, including this little top right here. This little top right here is like the bane of my existence when it comes to this specific technique. But much like the other stuff that you can rub off, you can just get a sponge and just start to kind of rim the top like this. Don't take too much off, it'll start to look unnatural. But just take your sponge, wet it, arc it over a little bit, and just rub a tiny bit. It comes off very easily, actually. And the same rule applies to the bottom. You just take a little sponge and wipe it off the bottom. Although technically a lot of underglazes don't have the glass-like material that would force it to stick to the kiln shelves, it always just bothers me to not have a nice clean bottom. So make sure your tops and your bottoms are clean, just like when you were 4 and you learned how to do the potty training. So after your pottery dries, make sure your tops and your bottoms are clean. Well, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. I just wanted to show you this technique. I spent maybe 5 minutes, so this isn't really as clean as I would prefer it to be. Sgraffito is pretty much just an Italian root word, which means to scratch through. When they figured out that you can put a layer of darker color over something lighter, scratch the surface, and make images like this out of it. But most of the time that you're going to see the sgraffito technique, you're probably going to see it in Grecian artwork because they have a heavy usage of it in a lot of their stuff. You can very easily do this technique with dark slip, you can do it with underglaze, you can technically do it with real glaze, but it's a little bit harder to do it on bisque. So underglaze and slip of a darker color on a lighter clay body is probably what you're going to want to go for when you first start out doing this. Hopefully this new sgraffito technique helps a lot of you with your ceramic artwork, and keep in mind that you don't have to do these exact same patterns I'm teaching you. If you feel like drawing a smiley face through sgraffito technique on your greenware, then please go ahead. Just please make sure you read the bottle to see what cone or what type of pottery it should be applied at. Far too many times do I have people message me after I tell them about this technique and they're like, "It didn't work!" Only to realize that they're using a stain that looks like underglaze but has no business being in the kiln in the first place. So please read the back of your underglaze bottles. Really quick before we get going, I want to give a big shout out to the Mako company. They sent me a huge box of a bunch of underglazes. They are not my sponsor. I want to make it very clear. I'm not sponsored by them. All they did is send me glazes. They asked me very politely, "Hey, can we send you some glazes?" I said yes. They wanted feedback on their glazes, and we're definitely going to give them feedback after we have this. I just felt like it wouldn't be very cash money of me if I accepted a bunch of underglazes and didn't tell you guys that they're the ones who sent them to me. So thank you guys for sending me these underglazes. I just felt like sooner or later we would have to talk about the sgraffito technique. And before doing research for this video, I didn't even know that the sgraffito technique was technically made in Italy, and it mostly wasn't used for ceramic artwork, because the high majority of art museums that I go to show the sgraffito technique being used on Grecian amphora vases and pottery. So I just heavily assumed that it was always created by the Grecians or by the Greek people. But actually it was kind of sourced back to Italy with a lot of their buildings, which you can clearly see in a lot of their architecture. To boot, this is an extremely easy technique. You pretty much just have to do the same thing I've been teaching you in the other carving technique videos, but put underglaze on and let it dry first. Well, thank you, Dirty Potters, for joining me today. If you'd like to see any of my actual artwork, the links are always down below for your beautiful Potter eyes to see. The Instagrams, the Facebooks, the how much I weigh. You don't need to know that. I'm trying to lose weight. Don't you shame me. Did you guys know that even attractive people are self-conscious about their bodies? And that in turn makes me feel better. Because if the hot person's having a hard time with their bodies, then what do I gotta worry about? And I'll put a little dot of color right there. Oh yeah, that's artistic. That's so artistic.